Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Big East Rewind. I'm your host, Chuck Everson from Villanova University, and my co-host, as always, is the sensational Sonny Spera from Syracuse. How are you, Sonny?
Chuck, I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day. We got a phenomenal guest. It's going to be a lot of fun talking to the Wildcats.
It's going to be a lot of fun, yeah. I mean, this guy is a teammate and a friend. God, probably know each other close to 40 years now, and been through a lot of stuff together. So it's going to be great to talk to him. He's the most appropriately nicknamed guy I've ever met in my life. We've got two guys that have got nicknames that are so, to use Coach Mass's expression, apropos to those guys. It's unbelievable. And one of them is the guy that's with us tonight, Easy Ed Pinckney. You know, he's a 13-year NBA veteran. He's coached in college. He's coached for the Chicago Bulls, and he's done stuff with the Minnesota Timberwolves he's coached with, and the Denver Nuggets. He's been around the league for years and years, and now he's a scout with the Houston Rockets. Welcome to the program, Easy Ed. How are you, Eddie? How you doing, man?
Well, thanks for the introduction. That was very well done.
Thank you. I like that. Thanks.
Well done.
So being that I mentioned it, who gave you the nickname Easy Ed? Because I've never, in all the years that I know you, I can think of one time that you got even a little upset. You've always been like an even-keeled guy. And the other guy I was thinking of with the nickname, as you know, is Happy Dobbs. You know, Frank Dobbs. Happy is always smiling. So who gave you the nickname Easy Ed?
So, like Stu Granger, our point guard,
right?
He just started calling me that.
Really?
And I don't know, what triggered it. I mean, it's always the way I've been. But Stu Granger gave me that name, and it stuck. And I can remember. So your first year at Villanova, we
right.
had these tops that there were these limited edition tops that Nike was going to make for us, and Coach Massimino said you could put on the back anything you wanted to put on the back. So of course, like you're thinking all, throughout the day, through the week, what am I going to put on the back? Am I just going to put my last name? Am I going to put a nickname? What am I going to put on the back? And of course, Stu Granger is like, you're putting Easy Ed on your back. So, it was a big thing, like, how are you going to spell it? And Chuck, you know me. I was just like, look, I don't care. Just put whatever you want. But my nickname's Easy Ed, so put that on the back. So the uniforms, the tops come back, and it's like Easy Ed. So I just, I wore it. It stuck, and I've had that name for years and years and years. And just coming from out in Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Summer League, and
right.
out a lot of former pros and NBA players, and I'm walking through Thomas and Mack Arena, and hey, Easy. What's I mean, the name is the name has stuck.
And listen, Stu. First of all, I can't believe Stu came up with that, because we both know how Stu is. He's a great guy, but I can't imagine him coming up with that. But it just fits your whole personality. That's the thing. It goes and it just fits the way you are.
Here was my thought, because I mean, you could either accept the nickname, right, or not accept it.
Right.
So I just said, like, okay, so this is a guy from New York. He's going to be passing me the ball for most of the game. So I think I'm going to accept this nickname by the guy who's going to give me the ball in the post. And, Stu's a great teammate, a lot of fun to be around.
Oh, yeah.
So it stuck. I was taking the nickname from my point guard.
Yeah. I don't blame you. Smart guy, because you're right. He's the guy giving you the rock. That's for sure.
If you want the ball, you get. Hey, listen.
You want the ball.
I always, I roomed with a point guard. Gary McLean was my roommate, and one of the main. I mean, Stu Granger was really instrumental in my recruitment to Villanova. So you know, as a big, I always got to get friendly with those little guys that have the pill all the time. So I mean,
see, that's why I hang out with Sonny. He kind of, you know, we work off each other because he feeds the post. He's old school, Eddie. You know, he feeds the post. You know, but it's so funny because we go back and forth with the big and the guard thing all the time. You know, like, you know, in baseball, the catchers get all the managerial jobs, and it seems that in basketball, the point guards get the coaching stuff, and we go back and forth all the time. And I've told them I was rooting for Patrick and the Hoyas to do well because we want Georgetown to do well, and when Georgetown does well, it's better for the league. But really, I'm rooting for Patrick as a big guy to open the door up for other big guys to get behind the bench, you know. And so Sonny and I go back and forth with that all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously we've all been a part of the rivalries, you know, Syracuse, Georgetown, Villanova, Syracuse, Villanova, you know, the whole deal and stuff. It's great that you guys are able to put this together, this platform to talk to former Big East players, you know, about their experiences. There's nothing like it. You really get an inside view, but it's, you know, I get to travel around the country. There aren't a lot of places where guys like yourself, the guys who have actually been in the trenches, are getting the stories from the players. I mean, you really bring a unique experience, you know, in a way that you present it to, you know, players, former players. It's nice. It's really well done and great to be on with you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you saying that, because it's been a labor of love for Sonny and I, you know, having played and I, you know, I went on my visit and stayed with Sonny. That's how I got to meet him, and we've been friendly ever since. You know, our daughters played against each other in AAU and stuff like that, so we kept catching up on the road. And there's a brotherhood there, man, because if you went through, it didn't matter what color your jersey was, you went through those battles in the Big East Conference back then, especially. You know, everybody's gone through similar experiences. It's just what jersey did you play on, and you know, and to hear about it, you know, we didn't really know for example, we didn't really know the Georgetown guys that well because, you know, they weren't allowed to get to know anybody based on who they were playing for. Coach Thompson kept a tight rein on those guys. And now, you know, we're hanging out with Gene Smith and, you know, and all these guys are coming around. It's been fantastic. It really has. Right, Sonny?
It's been a lot of fun. Yeah. You know, it's kind of breaking down some of the stereotypes that we all have. It's still hard to root for Georgetown as a Syracuse guy, but, you know, I am happy for their success, especially in the new Big East. And, you know, even though we left and are at the ACC, I have a lot of affection for the Big East, and I thought it was the greatest conference ever. And learning from the guys that talk about the vision of Dave Gavitt and how he put it together. And that class with Eddie, you, Chris Mullins, Pat Ewing, and I know myself, they don't talk a lot about me, but, you know, I know you guys were a big founding basis for the league. And one of the things they said was when that happened, you put the Big East now on the map. So, you know, I want to get into that, but I want to ask you a little more about like your background, because, you know, coming from the Bronx, talk about when basketball was introduced to you. When did that become part of your life?
So I lived in what's still called the Monroe Projects, and it's not far from Yankee Stadium. So in my neighborhood, there was a huge lean for most of the guys who were athletic to play baseball. A lot of guys played baseball. So did I. Wasn't any different. Fred Brown, and we bring up Georgetown often during these conversations because they were the class of our conference. But my point guard in high school was Fred Brown, who attended Georgetown. And he also was an amazing first baseman. All his brothers played baseball and the whole deal. In my situation, I wanted to play baseball. But what happened to me along the way, when I got to high school, I went into high school at 6'2". I grew 7 inches in high school.
Wow.
So the baseball thing went out the window, I started migrating over from the baseball field, because in Monroe Projects, there's a huge park right across the street from my house, and there's a baseball park and there's a basketball part of this park on Taylor Avenue. So I started migrating from the baseball field over to the basketball court as I grew. And that's, I was lucky. Things started taking off for me on the basketball court. I started to grow. I got an opportunity to play, youth basketball with the Gauchos, a little bit with Riverside Church. That opened the door to more competitive basketball. And then we also, with the Gauchos, started traveling a little bit. So yeah, that was kind of like my introduction to basketball. I grew 7 inches, and it took off from there.
Ed, I don't know if you probably won't remember, but we played you guys. My high school team played Adley Stevenson in the state. Well, it was actually a consolation game. You met up with Matt Doherty's Holy Trinity team. We played Ward Melville, and then the second day we played you guys. And I remember Freddie Brown was a tough guy, and I was a point guard. I remember he was a tough player, but I remember watching you play, and the nickname Easy sticks. You dunked so many basketballs effortlessly. And we had Sean Cairns, who was about 6'8" at the time. And I was like, no, that's just too easy. What he's doing is just too easy. So, so your success, though, at Adley Stevenson, you guys, I'm assuming, had a pretty good program, but you really helped elevate it, right? You and Fred?
Well, I give a lot of credit to two people. Fred Brown, I mean, he was a relentless competitor.
Yep.
On and off the court, because he was one of the top students in our school at the time. And a guy by the name of Clarence Moss, who came into our school, played as a junior that year, and he really elevated our team along with Fred. I mean, he was a tremendous basketball player. He went on to play small college basketball and stayed in and around the New York area. But he brought like he was kind of like Fred was the heart and soul of the team, but this guy he had a lot of flair on the court. And he really made us a special basketball team, along with Fred, who was being recruited by everybody in the entire country. But, both those guys were the leaders. I kind of followed their lead. Like, I wasn't, this highly recruited guy. It took a while for me to develop. I give a lot of credit to both those guys and my high school coach, Steve Post, because they worked with me, post practice, and really gave me a lot of confidence on the court.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about recruiting before we came on. And there was a big story, I think it was in the Daily News, where you were sitting amongst a ton of letters and talked about I remember even before I was really serious about going to Villanova, I remember reading that article when I was in high school. I'm a year behind you, as you know. And I remember reading the article and seeing, like, man, this guy's got stuff all over the place. Talk about that for a second, the recruiting process. And you said you had a story about that too, right?
Well, yeah, so again, Fred Brown afforded other coaches, because I mean, everybody in the entire country was coming to see him.
See Freddie, yeah.
Point guard, the whole deal with New York City point guards, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Very highly touted. So, this writer from the Daily News decided, he's going to follow me during my senior year and track the progress of who recruits me and where I end up going to school. So at the end of this year, I had this pile of letters from, all different kinds of schools, because my recruiting had ramped up. I became one of these players you talk about in the city and around the country. So anyway, the guy comes to my house. He does this interview. He's like, I want you to pile these letters up and, just put them on the on the table and stuff. I want everybody to see like all the correspondence you've gotten. One of the correspondents was the University of Houston. So, he's like, well, why didn't you go to the University of Houston? I said, it's too far, it's really far away and stuff. And, but one of their coaches, this guy sat outside of my house like every day. Like
Oh, really?
Sat outside of my house. He would follow me to school and follow me back. I'd get out of school, or I'd get out of practice, and the guy was standing right there. So I told this to the reporter. Well, you couldn't do that based on NCAA rules. So the University of Houston got into a little bit of trouble over that. They ended up letting the coach go and the whole deal. Like they read the article and they saw that, hey, this guy's illegally recruiting. So fast forward 2 years later, we're playing the University of Houston in the NCAA tournament. So I get on the elevator in the hotel that we're staying at in Houston, and there's Clyde Drexler and there's Hakeem Olajuwon. And Clyde Drexler goes to Hakeem Olajuwon, is this the guy who got our coach fired? He plays at Villanova. And Olajuwon just goes, I think so. And you know what happened in that game.
Yes, I do.
Followed us. They thought as if they needed more motivation to beat us. But
we got five slammer jamming. That's what happened to us.
We got five slammer jamming. So that article led to my demise in that NCAA tournament game 2 years later.
Wow.
So let me ask you this then. In high school, then you started to make connections with Chris Mullins and some other guys. Talk about how that all evolved.
Yes, so Chris played. He was a player with Riverside Church.
He was Riverside Church. Okay.
Yeah, so we, I would go down there, and you're always looking when you're in these youth leagues for young good players and play. And I was. At the time, I was big for that. They didn't have very many bigs. I think I was like 6'5" or 6'6" at the time. And I went down there and played, and I was just okay. But there was this redhead dude who was hitting shots from. I'm like, this is unbelievable. And it's Chris Mullins, right? So we're going through practice. I'm like, I gotta bring you home, because nobody's going to believe how good you are. Like, I got to bring you to this court. And Chris is like, I'll play anywhere. I don't care. So I bring Chris to the South Bronx, and we go to Monroe Projects right in the middle. We choose up sides, and we get on the court, and Chris is like killing. And I'm just like, man, this dude is like unbelievable. And my buddies till this day remember that day in the park, remember him killing. And it was all born out of my relationship and playing with him at Riverside Church and stuff. Right. And, since then, since all the travel ball, we've remained friends, up until this day. I mean, the guy is an amazing player, as we know, but even a more amazing person. Him and his family and our families used to try to sit together at the Big East tournament if they got seats together. But his mother, father, brothers, all just like great people.
Yeah, they were all. I got to know him pretty well too in summer leagues and stuff. They play out here, and it'd be Chris and his three brothers, Roddy and John and Terrence, all played. And the basketball IQ was off the charts. So you had no shot. You had, as soon as the door opened to the gym, somebody had to guard Chris because the guy could shoot from anywhere on a high school court, especially. You know what I mean? Long before the days of everybody shooting from the logo now. But he was always tough, and he gave us fits when we got to Villanova.
Well, you both know because you both played in parks in and around New York City. So like the whole thing, like when you go to a foreign park, it's like, all right, what do you got? So I bring this like left-handed white dude, and he's like runners, bank shots from the side, all everything. And everybody's like, holy crap, man, this dude is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an assassin.
So, Ed, talk about so you go from playing in the park, and now you're you go to the camps and stuff, the 5-star circuit and stuff. The AAU really wasn't that big then. It really didn't get its start till a couple of years later. The Riverside Church and the Gauchos and all those teams, I guess they all played in city leagues, right? Like summer leagues and stuff like that. Is that the deal?
Yeah, so there was a tournament because there were all kind of smaller leagues around the city,
right?
And then the big tournament was called Citywide, which was
that's right.
Split the boroughs up, and the winner of each borough played in Madison Square Garden. They had their own, kind of finals there, but the Gauchos were a little bit unique. I don't think at that time around the country there were many teams actually traveling.
Right.
We went to Utah, we went to Florida to play, we went all over the country to play.
Wow.
Kind of what that team afforded you to do. And with Riverside Church, we also went all over the place as well too. Got a chance to play with Chris in some tournaments, not close to home. And it gave you, I can remember the first time seeing Michael Jordan. That was with, Riverside Church in a tournament outside of the city. So it really gave you great exposure to other players, other places to play at universities.
So then as that starts to, you go through your summer circuit, so to speak, you wind up at 5-star basketball camp, right? And right. I know you were there at least once, and that's where you met your connection with Dwayne McClain and Gary McClain, right? How did that go?
Yes, at 5-star basketball camp, there's the infamous Station 13. Everybody knows about that. You learn, a move or two there. But there's also an opportunity for other college coaches to speak to the group of players. It was the first time I was introduced to Rick Pitino.
Yeah.
First time I was introduced to Mitch Bonagero was at this basketball camp. Well, during one of the lectures, there's a little point guard that gets up and reenacts a scene out of a coach and recruiting meeting. And, we both know this individual. It turned out to be Gary McClain. And Gary, as you know, is one of the funniest people we know. I mean, this guy has a tremendous sense of humor. So he does this whole scene with this player coach kind of interaction, and it's funny. And after it's all over, you kind of break, you either go up to get something to eat or, go to Station 13 or what have you. Well, Gary makes a beeline for Dwayne McClain, and I'm watching this whole thing. They both then come over to me via Mitch Bonagero, and we start talking about Villanova. They both had committed already, and that was kind of like my first introduction to Villanova. I hadn't taken a visit yet. They had already been there via their the recruitment started there, and man, it's been a relationship that we've had now for over 30 years, but it started right there at 5-star basketball camp.
Wow. I knew that's where you met those guys, and they've talked about that, especially Gary. And, Gary and I have been close, and Dwayne too, of all these years. And I've heard that's where you met, but I never heard the story of how that all got together. That's pretty great. That it was as fate would have it. Who knew that eventually you guys were going to wind up winning a national championship together, right? That's something else.
As seniors.
That's storybook stuff, man.
Yeah, well, again, I give a lot of, Chuck, and we talk about this, Sonny, I'm sure in the same manner. Like your college coaches are at that time everything for you, right? I mean, they're they're kind of like you're away from home, right? So in many cases, they are kind of like father figures to you. And, Massimino had that effect on me and my family, and, just the same as Gary and Dwayne. So, I feel lucky to have been in that kind of environment, because I talk to pros all the time and stuff. Some have connections with the university, some don't. In fact, most don't. They don't go back when they go to pros, but it's it was kind of like a normal thing to see, I don't know, Stu Granger or Happy Dobbs, whether they were playing in the NBA or not, still come back, give knowledge about the real world or whatever the case may be. But those guys were always around, and that spoke volumes to me when I first came to Villanova.
Talk about playing for Coach Mass. Now, this is the short Italian tornado, right? Like, he's got to be like just an absolute tempest and whirlwind and emotions. He wears his heart on his sleeve. I mean, to me, that's my whole family. Okay, I'm Italian. I get that. How was that to you? All of a sudden, this is your coach, and this is who he is. How did that blend work for you?
So Sonny, right? Okay, so here's the guy who comes to my house, right? Sweet talks my father. Sweet talks my mother. Oh, we're gonna treat this nice little guy. We're gonna make sure he graduates, and I'm gonna have him over my house, and we have pasta. The whole deal, right? Now, it's up to the coach to make sure that all this stuff happens, and it did.
Right.
Everything he said in the recruiting meeting held true. The one thing he left out were the practices. He didn't tell my parents he was going to be yelling and screaming at me, kicking me out of practice to motivate. He left all that stuff out. The guy is one of the best coaches, if not the best coach I've ever been around, having been a coach myself. When I first started coaching, Jay Wright gave me my first professional coaching position at Villanova. It's now 15 years later. Massimino is still coaching at Northwood. So I'm calling this dude up for like best used practices, how to play pick and rolls. Coach, what do you do? We got this guy in our league, Roy Hibbert. He is a monster in the post. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, and he knew. He was so plugged in. He was the consummate coach's coach. Coaches love talking to him about schemes, about defense, best used practices, and I was right there with him. The guy was an unbelievable coach to be around on a day-to-day basis.
How did your personality handle that personality when he was
he hated that? Garbage.
He didn't cut you a lot of slack, Eddie. I have to say, at practice, you didn't. You got yelled at like the rest of us, man.
You're easy, Ed. No, so Chuck, you were there, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're not practicing hard. Get the hell out. What do you mean get the hell out? I'm practicing my balls off here. You're not practicing hard enough. Get the hell out of here. The guy would kick me out.
Yeah.
I'd go downstairs. I'm like, I got to practice with the team because everybody's going to be mad at me if I just walk out. So I'd have to come back upstairs. Then he'd go, all right, we're going to start from the beginning. Would be like an hour and a half into practice. Start from the beginning. And when I mean start from the beginning, we're stretching. The whole deal. This was the epitome of Rolly Massimino. And, I got to say, like, thank God for Mitch Bonaguro, who recruited me to Villanova, along with Gary and Dwayne. But like, he's like, hey, he's just trying to motivate you. Don't take it personal. When Marty Marbach is screaming and yelling at you, don't take it personal. These guys are just trying to get you better, But yeah, he was, he could be very confrontational in practice. Once practice was over, he turned back into Daddy Massimino. So
It's cool.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned. I forgot that he started over a few times. It's not. Listen, Sonny, he wasn't the warm fuzzy guy that he was towards the end of his life in his 80s, and his whole personality changed. Everybody forgets, and Jay tells the story. Everybody forgets that this guy was a maniac on the floor, but then he would give you a hug afterwards, or we'd go out to eat or whatever. So it worked out. It was really good. So.
Well, again, in Mitch Bonagaro's words, because this is how because I honestly, like Sonny, like he was two different people. Like you get the come over for pasta guy who talked to you about like life, and then you got the your ghoulies puckering, you suck, you're not going to be ready for the most difficult moment in Madison Square Garden. The guy would absolutely obliterate you on the court. But like Mitch Bonaguro would always say, you think you have it better? He treats us the same way. Like he's yelling and screaming at the coaches too. Like you guys aren't the only ones that get it. We get it too. And when he said that to me, I had a better understanding of who the person was. And again, we kept the relationship. I mean, the guy was at my wedding. I have a picture of Rolly Massimino dancing on this yacht on the Hudson. He's dancing with my mother, dancing with my sisters. But that's him. That was him. Man.
Yeah.
Now, when you're coming in, so let's talk about just some of the matchups. So the obvious marquee matchup for you as a freshman is Patrick Ewing, and your careers sort of, they are very parallel. Talk about just how did you handle, or what were some of the things that you saw in the matchups that were going to be beneficial or that you could try to do that would help Villanova over Georgetown?
So it was always a team deal, because it was never like me against him, because again, the class of the league. And look, nothing against like Charles Smith, nothing against Bill Winnington, nothing against those are two guys that played a long time in the NBA.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're both NBA caliber guys. Bill Winnington's won championship. Charles Smith is like a 50-point game in the NBA. But there was nothing like going up against Patrick, because he was number one player in the class, number one team all 4 years.
Number one draft pick.
Coach.
Yeah.
He had everything. He was everything that every college player wanted to be. But and Chuck, you mentioned Thompson kept them away.
Yeah.
From maintaining friendships throughout the league. I had the one maybe trump card that no one else had, and that was my point guard from high school, Fred Brown.
Right.
And Fred Brown would always tell me, like, Patrick is like one of the nicest dudes ever, and we all know that. But as players, when you stepped on that line, he was coming, and Hoya Paranoia was coming, and it was coming.
Right.
But I always had this image in my mind of Patrick and Fred in their dorms or in the student hall, and they're hanging out and all of that stuff. So I always kept that in my mind, preparing to play against him. And sometimes it helped, and most times it didn't, because that dude was just that dominant and that great of a player.
Oh, yeah. Well, you always seem to have, your best games against Patrick. I remember my freshman year at the Palestra, we won a game. I think we were down 5 with like 40 or 45 seconds to go in the game. We won the game in regulation, and you had like 27 and 23 or some crazy number. Talk about that. That was the first time I had been involved with a team in a game to that magnitude, where the court got bum rushed by 15,000 people in a split second. As soon as the game ended, we got mobbed on there. And that was one of your better games in your, I guess it was your sophomore year, right?
Yeah. So couple things in regards to that game, right? The starting center for Villanova, John Pannone. So
yeah,
and we haven't like I always talk about John because one of the toughest teammates I ever had, right? So he gives you a lot of confidence. Second thing is and I don't know if you remember this, Chuck, like 2 months before that, I had knee surgery.
Yeah.
I had gotten hurt in a summer league game and I was trying to like come back, from like an injury. So I had knee surgery just a month or two before that game. So it was like a big deal for me. And then the third thing was like Gary McLean, who was my roommate at the time, was like, oh my God, I don't know if we're gonna win this game, man. Patrick Ewing is coming and all this stuff. So he was kind of like gassing me up in our dorm room in preparation for that game. But it's one of the games that definitely sticks out to me because it was a big game for our team.
Yeah.
For me to regain my confidence back, because I said, like, I kind of felt like if I couldn't play in this game, it was going to be tough for the rest of the league because, again, you go up to Syracuse, that's a tough run. It's not, you don't have it. You go to St. John's, that's a tough run.
Yeah.
Hall, Boston, all these teams were really, really good teams. But, that was a great game for us, a signature game for Massimino, too, because, he had to prove that he could, kind of start to beat these teams. And fortunately for us, we did.
Yeah, that team, Ed, was to me, that was the most talented team I think I ever played on and was a part of. But not only did we have the core group for the 85 team, but we also had John, Mike, and Stu on that team.
Yeah, I agree with you. That team, if we went head to head, because Pannone, Granger, and Moquin all brought like a toughness element that was like unbelievable. I mean, because we and you just learn so much from them. We go to these like away tournaments, and we'd be playing like these highly touted teams, and they would just go in, and it was just like surgery, man. They would do their deal. We'd come in, back cleanup or whatever. And it was just like a lot of fun. But I learned a lot from, especially John Pannone and Granger, because they were like, when it got to game time, they were like so serious about the approach, what you had to do to accomplish the win on the road. And I think that really helped us as we went on.
So let's go into the 85 now. As 85 season rolls on, you guys, before you get on your run, talk about going and the tournament, the Big East tournament itself. It's in Madison Square Garden, the best place on the planet. And you guys come in off a tough, I think you lost to Pitt, but you come in now to the Big East. Talk about the Big East tournament that year.
Yeah, so the league was really tough. I mean, again, St. John's and Georgetown both at the top of the standings. And I mean, I'm talking about the national standings all year long. Those two teams are the measuring stick. And they're winning. We're kind of like a middle of the road team. We won some games early, lost in the middle, and we're fighting to get into the tournament. And we need to win Big East tournament games in order to get into the tournament. There wasn't this, 65 teams get in. It was less, so Selection Sunday was really important to all of us. So, we lost to Pitt. At Pitt, we got destroyed. The game was on national TV. So as a senior, you get this sense of like strong purpose to not only win, but win for the guys who came before you, and then you want to leave something special for the players after you that are, you know, younger than you.
Yeah.
So I think like that's like our team really came together during that time, because you just get really focused in on trying to win each game.
Yeah.
To get to the tournament. And we still, even if we had won all of our games, we still didn't know if we were actually going to get in. And I can distinctly remember Massimino saying, if we get an NIT bid, I'm not taking it. You guys stunk all year. And I'm like, oh my God, this will be the first time Villanova's gone not to the NCAA tournament, but to the NIT.
You know, to your point, Ed, the intensity level of the practices changed, and you, Gary, and Train also changed. It seemed like you guys got serious about being leaders, and it was a different tact in practice. You know, the practices just seemed to amp up right after that Pittsburgh game. Did you feel that?
Yeah, I think, you know, so Massimino yelled less because, again, his tactic was to, you know, just really put you in difficult situations early on during practice, and then at the end, just let you play.
Yeah.
So that was his genius. And then for us, I mean, you know, it was about like, this is what we learned from like Mike, John, and Stu. I mean, like this was their approach. When it came tournament time, there was no, you know, I'm going to Bartley to meet this girl. You know, there was no screwing around at all. Like you kind of put everything to the back burner, and it was all about trying to win tournament games and stuff. And I learned that from those guys. I mean, that's where we all got it from.
And that's still the way it is at Nova today. I mean, the older guys teach the younger guys and down the line. But you guys didn't have that moment when the three of you got together and said, "Hey, what are we doing? We gotta fix this."
No, I think again, you know, during that senior year, there's a sense of like other things get in the way. Can I make it to the NBA? What pick are you gonna get picked?
Yeah.
All of those things kind of get in the way of your thought process. And really, the most important thought should be what you're doing right at that moment. And you take care of that right there, and then everything else comes after. But you know, there's agents on campus. It was a wild time for you know, all of the seniors at that time. And you know, I have kids, you know, during their senior year can be either difficult or tough because they're all wondering like, oh my God, I'm getting out of school. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? So there was some of that for us as seniors. But I think once you get on the court, once you get picked, the Big East tournament's over. You know you're in now. Now it's all about like trying to not be eliminated in the first round, because again, that was not what Villanova teams did. They didn't lose in the first round. And two, let's see how far you can get. Let's see how far you can go.
So you guys get on this run, and you beat the number one seed in the second round. You beat Dayton in the first round on their home floor as an 8-9. You're the lowest seed that's ever really won the NCAA. But talk about how that run happens now, and then you get to the Final Four, and there's 3 Big East teams. You know, so talk about just that event.
Well, one, the run for us is a sense of pride because we all still fill out. I mean, it's 30 years later, right? So Chuck is kind of like the Pied Piper for us all. He emails, you know, these brackets to all of the members of that team and some other guys now, because Villanova's been successful in the tournament later on with Jay Wright. And we all fill out these brackets, and everybody's like, who's the Villanova of this year? You know, we can't have them break a record of you know, beating the 3 number 1 seeds. But yeah, it was a lot of fun being part of that run. And again, I always give a lot of credit to Massimino because he so our first game's at Dayton on their home court.
Yep.
So he got us thinking like somehow like the NCAA's against us. I mean, forget about they put us in the tournament, but now they're against us. The NCAA and all their people, the selection committee, they're against us because we got to play at home. We got to play on someone's home court. And that fueled like a lot of our, play during the tournament.
It's a little John Thompson psychology right there.
Yeah. Like if you were not from the Big East, you were not invited because at the time that we're playing, we're also watching Pittsburgh, Boston College, St. John's, and Georgetown. And when we're not playing, we're laughing at you're not beating Pittsburgh. I mean, you're going to try to beat Michael Adams. That's not happening. They play in the Big East. I mean, it was a sense of pride for us all and stuff. And then we finally get to the Final Four. And, it was, it's 3 years that culminates all into that moment. Our family's all excited about us getting there. But this is something that Massimino constantly talked about, getting to the Final Four. He painted a picture for us of what it would be like. Didn't tell us we were going to have to try to beat almost the perfect team in Georgetown. We didn't know they were going to be there, and St. John's was going to be there also. But he painted a great picture for us. And, fortunately for us in the game to get to the Final Four, North Carolina, they were a young team. And, we were able to come up big in the games.
What were some of your favorite memories of that time during the Final Four or the championship or anything in that run?
Man, just I can, some of the things that stand out, Chuck, are like the huddles.
Yeah.
Getting in the huddles, and we all get together. I think we got $7 a day per meal. So, that was our form of motivation. We get $21 for 3 meals, and we would all get in the huddle and say, "Oh, we're getting meal money if we keep this win going." I mean, those are some of the things that stand out. Jake Nevin is something that stands out for me because I had a really strong connection with him, our trainer, longtime trainer at Villanova, who we all loved. Great, he had a great sense of humor. During tough times in practice, having him around was always great. So having him around and experiencing that was a lot of fun. And then just seeing the joy on my family's face after we would win each game was a lot of fun too. That's something that my kids obviously didn't get a chance to experience that.
Yeah.
When we're at family gatherings, my sisters will talk about we drove down to, see, Uncle Eddie play, and he did this and that and all this stuff. So it's a lot of fun to kind of reminisce about that.
Yeah. Jake was a character. Sonny, we get the white tube socks, like everybody has, right? So Ed goes to his locker. I don't know if you remember Ed. Ed goes to his locker. It says right and left on his tube socks. So he knew which one to put on which foot. Jake wrote right and left on the tube socks. I remember that like it was
actually ahead of his time, because now on Nike socks, they have right and left. They
I know.
Like it's it's a badge of honor. But yeah, in the early 80s, Jake Nevin, he started that whole trend.
That's right. That's right. So go ahead, Sonny.
So you do something, right? You get one trip to the Final Four. This is Patrick and Georgetown's third trip to the Final Four, and you guys do something that you haven't said, but I'm sure there was part of the conversation from Five Star that said, "Hey, let's get together. Let's do something special." So now you guys have accomplished it. Talk about what happens next, because you have obviously a very long, great career in the NBA. Talk about the next step for you.
Yeah, so that game happens, and really, the thing I like to talk about most is a relationship back with Villanova, because I mean, I played a long time in the NBA. I've been a broadcaster and now an executive in the NBA. And nobody remembers, if I played with Larry Bird and Kevin McHale. People don't remember me for that. They don't talk about, hey, you coached Derrick Rose during his MVP season run. Nobody remembers that. I'm in the middle of the Las Vegas airport last week. Guy comes up to me. He's from Washington, D.C. And he goes, you broke my heart, man. I was a Georgetown fan through and through. And how did you guys win that game? And that's the thing that I just most cherish, having been a Chuck's teammate and everyone else that was on part of that team. It's something that we all hold special to this day. April 1st, I get a text from everybody on the team about, hey, happy anniversary. It's April 1st. I mean, it's hard to get relationships like that in this world today. And I really cherish it to no end. It's a funny story. My oldest son, Shay, loves Grant Hill. He loves Grant Hill. This is when Grant Hill was making his way with the Detroit Pistons. My oldest son, Shay, is a fan of his. Dad, you got to get me Grant Hill's autograph. Okay, no problem. Shouldn't be a problem. Here's what happens. I'm stretching on one side of the court. At the time, I'm with the Miami Heat. Grant Hill's on the other side of the court. I'm like, Grant, hey, can I, get you to sign some sneakers for my son? No response. I say it louder. I'm like, hey, Grant, can you sign these shoes? I want to get my shoe. Guy doesn't respond. I'm like, okay, so he's getting ready for the game or whatever. I'll ask him after the game. After the game, I go to the Detroit locker room and I walk up to Grant Hill's locker and I'm like, Grant, look, can you sign these shoes for my son? My son loves you. Guy walks right past me. I go to the door and the locker. I'm like, hey, what's up, man? What's the problem? He's like, look, man, I was at Coach Thompson's house when you guys beat them in 1985. My father and he were best friends. So I was at the house when everybody in the house was crying and screaming. So I've hated you my whole life. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You hate it? Yeah, I never liked you. Took the sneakers, signed them, threw them back at me and walked out the door. I was like, wow.
Get over it, Grant. It's been a long time.
Right. So that's what came after.
That's a Duke guy too.
He's
not even in the Big East. Jeez.
But the guy had a connection to John Thompson. And that's what I mean. You say, what comes after? What came after were continued great memories of that game. I got an opportunity to play in the NBA, played with some great players, worked with some great people, had a lot of fun, but the lasting memory is, with my teammates from Villanova. That's a memory that will never go away, ever.
Yeah, you'll have that bond forever. There's no doubt. Go ahead, Ted.
You mentioned, Ed, playing with the Celtics. I know you played 5 years with the Celtics, right?
Right.
So, and you were at the end of his career, you were with Larry and Parrish and McHale. So you were with their big three, if you would, right? So talk about what that was like in practice, having to guard those guys. I mean, your job, on the second team was kind of like me and Wyatt on the second team trying to guard you, right? Only you got to guard Bird and McHale and Parrish. A little different. I understand what you're going to say.
In that, so here's how I got to Boston. So at the time, I was playing with your teammate and mine, Chuck, Harold Presley in Sacramento. That's how let me stop you there, Ed. Talk before you get into because this has to do with Boston too. Bill Russell was the GM for that team in Sacramento. Yeah,
right?
you remember that.
So talk about how he called Coach Mass the genius. You remember that story?
So couple things like I get to the team. I get to Sacramento. Hal Presley's on that team. Bill Russell first of all, it's Bill Russell, right? So I'm like in awe. I read the book, watched 11 I mean, this guy's like a legend, right? To everybody.
Right.
We're traveling in private planes. We're traveling commercially. So people like, I can remember one time, George Foreman, the boxer, we're sitting in like this section of the airport, and George Foreman, the boxer, sees Bill Russell, and he's like in like awe. So this is what we were around, right? So Bill Russell proceeds to tell Presley and I, like, one of the reasons I wanted to be a part of this team, obviously I get to coach and manage, but like, you guys from Villanova, I always felt you played the right way. Coach Massimino's a guy I respect. Unbelievable. This is Bill Russell telling us this.
Wow.
And I'm just like, man, this is unbelievable. Like how the impact that Coach Massimino's had on other people, including Bill Russell. So anyway, Bill Russell also traded me to Boston.
Okay.
But thank God for that. Thank God for that, because I get to play with the guys you mentioned, Bird, Mikhail Parrish, these legendary guys. And you talked about their practice. I felt, because I had played in the NBA for 4 years before going to Boston, I really felt that it was the first time I was in an NBA environment every day. Those three guys, including Dennis Johnson.
Yeah, right. DJ was on that team. Yep.
Their daily approach to practice was freaking unbelievable. They competed, and unfortunately, and Chuck, you mentioned it, I had to guard Larry Bird. That was not a lot of fun because the guy would always come in. He was always motivated to practice. Some of the best stuff you ever saw was happening in practice. And I was like his practice dummy. This dude was like going off on me, shooting all these shots. And Mikhail would go from being a supporting player to the starting, because if you remember, he didn't start.
Yeah, he was the sixth man, right?
Bench. So I would start and he would replace me. But when he went over to the starting team, so it's Joe Klein and myself, and we're trying to stop Robert Parrish, Larry Bird, and Kevin McHale. And that was just like crazy, but I thought it really prepared me to play high-level basketball in the NBA. And you learn a little bit of leadership, because in the NBA, like, you got all kinds of different motivations for players. It could be money, to play on a different team. That was kind of like the first time I felt like everybody was pulling in the same direction, aside from all the sidebar things that happened to try to win basketball games. It was the first time I really experienced that.
Talk about Larry at practice. I mean, he was a huge trash talker. He's legendary trash talker. I think the story, there was a story with you and him about practice, how he came in and told you what he was going to do before he did it. Did that happen?
No, that happened every day. And Joe Klein knows the story, right? Because like they were the veterans and we were the young guys. So Bird would come in, Pinckney, what'd you do last night? I know you were home with the family, but guess what? Just get ready. I hope you got a lot of rest. Just get ready to get this ass kicking, because I am going to kick your ass. And I'd be like, all right, bring it on. Let's go. And then Robert Parrish would say to Joe Klein, like, you think you're being excluded from this? I'm going to kick your ass. And then Mikhail was kind of like in the middle, and he would just be like, I'll be your teammate for the first part of practice, but I'm going to have to kick both you guys' asses too. I mean, it was great team fun. It was a lot of fun to those guys. I can remember one time, because they would invite, if you want, Chris Ford was the head coach at that time.
Villanova guy.
He'd let you bring anybody into practice. So I can remember our teammate Mark Polanski coming to practice one time, and Larry's just like on the court warming up, shooting and stuff. And you know how confident Polanski is. He's like, man, tell him I want to shoot against him. I'm like, Mark, you work on Wall Street. You cannot beat Larry Bird in the shooting contest. Come on, I just want to try. I'm like, I'm not even going to ask him because guess what? Like, he will take all your money. Trust me. I'm telling you, I watch this dude every day. You can't, and he like killed me all till this day. He's like, you should have let me shoot against Bird. I'm like, you wouldn't have won.
Not for nothing. Mark's really got nothing to talk about. I beat Mark in shooting, you know, after when we had the 30th anniversary. He goes, here, let's see what you got. I go, hold this ring, and I knock a 3 down from out of bounds on the baseline. And he couldn't make a shot. So if he can't beat me, he's not going to get close to Larry Legend.
This is the most confident guy in the universe.
Confident's a good word, Ed.
He wanted to challenge Larry Bird at the height of Larry Bird being Larry Bird. I'm like, nah, I don't think you want to do that, man.
That's funny. It's amazing, the stories, and it doesn't matter at what level, you know, the guys are the guys, right? You know, whether you're in the locker room or on the court stretching and the trash talk and all that stuff. So now you go through the Celtics and you're coming down towards the end of your career, and you wound up in Milwaukee and eventually in Miami, and then you got into broadcasting. So talk about how, well, first you were at Villanova and then broadcasting, but we touched on that. So talk about the broadcasting part, and what was the preparation like for you? It was almost like prepping for playing a game, right? I mean, we've had guys on and they say it's very tough. Like Raftery has a whole thing that he goes through to make sure that he knows what he's talking about.
No, I was fortunate because along the way in the NBA, I had great mentors. I mean, some of the best. And I mean, again, I include Bird, McHale, and Parrish, Dennis Johnson, all those guys. But they always would talk about, like, you sit in the back of the bus and they'd be like, this is going to end. Like, what are you going to do after? Like, what, you know, those guys were constantly talking about that as older players than I was. So when you hear that, you start thinking, yeah, I mean, here it is. These guys are the top of the charts in terms of our profession, and they already know, like, you know, in your mid-30s, when you're a young man, you got to have another profession. So I always thought about that. When I got to Miami, you know, I played for Pat Riley. We had some really difficult practices. I mean, he was, and it's well noted, the guy was a taskmaster in terms of, you know, preparing his team to play. But I knew going through that year, I was like, there is no way I'm going to be able to continue to drag this young dude, Alonzo Mourning, up and down the court every day. I can't do it. I can't handle it now. So I went to Pat Riley, and he's like, look, you know, we had a successful year. I want you to come back and possibly back up, you know, Mourning. So I go, Coach, like, I really enjoyed your leadership. It was great being around this team, but Alonzo's like really good. I can't play against this dude anymore, man. I mean, I just can't do it. He's like, well, listen, like, I want you to really think about it because I want to keep this team intact. We lost to the Bulls in the conference finals. I think if we get another player or two, we'll be able to do it. So I you know, he tells me, go home, think about it. I go home. I tell my wife, Rose, I'm like, another season practicing against Alonzo, I'm just not going to be able to do it. So I go back next day, tell Riley, look, Coach, I can't do it. He's like, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, look, I studied broadcasting in school. I know, I'm hoping that I can get an opportunity with one of the networks to announce some college basketball games and stuff. I got my kids and stuff. They're getting older. I'm not around them enough. So he says, hey, why don't you do that here? why don't you think about doing that here? If I can't get you on the team, I'd love for you to maybe explore broadcasting on radio here with the Miami Heat. And that's exactly what happened. I transitioned from playing to doing the radio broadcast. And, that's how my broadcasting career took off. I mean, Pat Riley was really instrumental. He gave me a lot of constructive criticism through the year and, just had an opportunity to get better and better as the years went on.
And then, go ahead, Sonny.
I mean, the Miami organization, we had stats on too. And it's such a class act. And like what they just did with Udonis Haslem. I mean, they don't have plans for him playing, but they want him and they want his being around. It sounds exactly like what Riley was talking to you about. So, I mean, they really have, and the longevity of their coaches, that's a great organization. So talk about then. So from there, you then go to coaching, but you went to college coaching first, right?
Yeah, I thought, and like as the years went on with broadcasting, I got an opportunity to work at some of the retired players' basketball camps. And kind of what this is it's a forum that's run by John Lucas, and they give an opportunity to former players in the NBA to coach former players' sons. And they usually invite some of the top players in the country. It's the first place I met or saw Kobe Bryant play, at this retired players forum. And they used to have it at Princeton. So I went up there, got a chance to partake in some of these camps. And one of the kids, Will Sheridan, who, Chuck, a center at Villanova. That's the first place I met Will Sheridan. But I got the coaching bug. So I went back to Miami and I told, Coach Riley, I said, hey, I think I want to explore coaching. And Sonny, as you mentioned, they have their coaches and they don't all change very often. They typically have the same guy for many, many years. So there wasn't an opening. I knew if I had to get into coaching, I had to start. If I wanted any respect, I had to start from scratch. So I left the broadcasting, went, coached in the USBL for a year, and Jay Wright saw that I was coaching in the USBL. He's like, I didn't know you wanted to coach. I'm like, yeah, I was going to these camps. I liked it. I liked the interaction with the players. I thought it was a great profession and stuff. Well, he goes, listen, I have this guy, Joe Jones, on my staff. He's about to go to Columbia. Would you be interested in maybe interviewing for the job at Villanova? And I did. And that's what started my career at Villanova. Joe Jones left. Jay wanted to recreate what he said was, because, Duke gets a lot of credit. You'll hear Jay Wright say Villanova was Duke before Duke was Duke. At the time, Johnny Dawkins was the assistant coach at Duke. Jay Wright wanted to create that with me. And that's how I got the opportunity at Villanova to come back and coach.
And your forte was recruiting, because you got some of the top guys probably in the program, to this day to come in there, right? What were some of the guys that you were instrumental in getting them to put on the blue and white of Villanova? Yeah,
well, I mean, like the guy who gets probably the most notoriety, and Chuck, like the way Jay coached and taught you how to recruit, because he, like, in terms of recruit, the guy is ridiculous. I mean, he's unbelievable. But Kyle Lowry was one of the guys, was very instrumental in help coming to Villanova. It's always like a team deal, because Jay is the ultimate closer when it comes to recruiting. I'll never forget this recruiting moment we had in Rudy Gay's house. Rudy Gay's high school AAU coach wanted no part of Villanova. He did not want him there. And, I was kind of like the lead on the recruiting portion of his recruitment. So we go in there, and I'll never forget this. The AAU coach told Jay, you know what? Before this recruiting meeting, you guys had absolutely no chance. That was the best presentation I've ever seen in my life by Jay Wright. We didn't get Rudy Gay, but I learned from that presentation that Jay made how to lay out a plan for a college athlete. It was unbelievable. He just did such a great job. And, I was in a ton of homes with him, and it was the same deal. We did the same thing for Kyle Lowry. He did the same for Alan Ray, Randy Ford.
Right. Randy, yep.
All those guys. But, I cannot take full credit because, again, this guy's going into the Hall of Fame, as you mentioned. And those early days, the guy was a ridiculous closer when it came to, closing in on guys. I mean, Corey Fisher is another guy we recruited, highly touted point guard from New York. Corey Fisher's mom and uncle wanted him to come to Villanova. He wasn't so sure, but again, Jay Wright, ultimate closer, man, just closed the whole thing down. It was over, after we both came in and met with his family.
The Mariano Rivera of college coaches. He comes in and closes the door, right?
Yeah, now he's ridiculous. I mean, you'd have to see it to, and the one recruitment mission that the Rudy Gay thing, because he knew, like, oh man, I don't know if we're gonna get this kid. I'm like, nah, coach, I'm telling you, I've talked to the kid, his family, they like us a lot and stuff. What I didn't know is that the AAU coach was like, there's no way he's coming to Villanova. And like, I joke with Rudy Gay to this day. I'm like, man, how come he didn't come? We would have been so good. And he's like, nah, man, my AAU, I loved you guys, but my AAU coach was not having it. He was not letting me come to Philadelphia to play for you guys, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
One more question on the coaches, Ed, and then we'll on the coaching stuff, and then we'll wrap it up. Now that you're in the NBA and you were coaching in the NBA, what are the biggest differences between coaching a college kid and coaching now a pro, an NBA pro?
There's not much of a difference because we all played here, right? What's the biggest thing as a player you want? You want knowledge. So as much knowledge as you can impart on the play, that's the most important thing. That's all college players want and NBA players want. Because, right, they get paid in college now, right? So what's the difference? Not much.
Right. Yeah.
The transition period for some of these top players now, it's just a couple of months. We drafted the number 2 pick in the draft in a kid by Jalen Green. The kid did not go to college. So you're seeing that more. So what all these kids want is they want to know what are the best used practices in order for me to improve my game, improve my shooting, improve my ball handling, all of that. Who are the best nutritionists, yoga people? And you've got to deliver the goods when it comes to that. And I don't think it changes via the level. In fact, in the future, it might trickle down to the high school level too. All the top players want that tremendous schooling that you get so they can further their careers.
And I know we're up against it. So give us your final thought on your experiences. Again, what would you say to a young kid who was being recruited and also, as you had the experience that you had going through Villanova, give us your final thoughts on that whole experience with, dealing with Coach Mass and now with Jay there.
No, well, the final thing would be just great experience, loved it, still have a connection.
Yep.
Trying to get to our golf outing on the 30th, that happens every year.
Yep.
I have a wedding on the 29th, but it's a relationship that just never ends, man. Jay Wright has continued it. He learned it from Coach Massimino, and I just feel lucky to be a part of the whole thing, man. And it was great being on with you guys. You guys do a fantastic job, and keep it going. Do not stop doing this. Get as many guys as you can, because everybody loves it. I'm telling you, keep going.
I appreciate that. And I might have to borrow your Rolodex and get some of your contacts to get this thing going. I only know so many people. I don't know the amount of people that you do. So I'll have to tap into that.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Appreciate that, man.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you, Ed, and being you haven't changed not even that much since I know you, since the day I walked onto campus. You're still that same guy, man. And that's what I love about you more than anything.
Hey, Chuck, you know what today's show was like?
What's that?
It was easy.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Easy.
Easy. That's right. So today, thank you for listening to the Big East Rewind with Sonny, Spera, and Chuck Everson. The Big East Rewind has been brought to you by and directed and produced by Daryl Gurney and Ed Chico Corvus. You can get us on YouTube. Please don't forget to subscribe. And if you need to make any kind of comments or suggestions, you can also email Sonny and I at bigeastrewind@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. Have a great night.
Peace out.